From delusion, lead me to truth. From darkness, lead me to light. From death, lead me to immortality. 1.3.28. This universe is a trinity, and this is made of name, form, and action. The source of all names is the Word, for it is by the Word that all names are spoken. The Word is behind all names, even as Brahman is behind the Word. The source of all forms is the eye, for it is by the eye that all forms are seen. The eye is beyond all forms, even as Brahman is behind the eye. The source of all actions is the body, for it is by the body that all actions are done. The body is behind all actions, even as Brahman is behind the body. Those three are one. Atman, the spirit of life, and Atman, although one is those three, the immortal is veiled by the real. The spirit of life is the immortal. Name and form are real, and by them the spirit is veiled. 1.6. Once Gargya Abrahmin, proud of his learning, went to Ayatsatru, the king of Benares, and said, I am willing to teach you about Brahman. I will give you 1,000 gifts. If you can, said the king. And then the people will run and say, our king's bounty is as great as that of King Yanaka. So Gargya began and said, there is a spirit in the sun high above, and that spirit I adore as Brahman. How can you say that? Replied Ayatasatru. I only consider the sun as the ruler of radiance, the source of all beings on earth. Then Gargya said, there is a spirit in the moon far away, and that spirit I adore as Brahman. Ayatsatru answered, I only consider the moon as the ruler of the sacred Soma wine, dressed in whiteness. There is a spirit in lightning, then said Gargya, and that spirit I adore as Brahman. I only consider lightning, said Ayatasatru, as a thing of brightness. Gargya said, there is a spirit in the eternal ethereal spaces, and that spirit I adore as Brahman. How can you say that? Replied Ayatasatru. I only consider the ethereal space as a non-evolving fullness. Gargya said, there is a spirit in the wind, and that spirit I adore as Brahman. Ayatasatru answered, I only consider the winds as the unconquerable army of powerful Indra. Gargya said, there is a spirit in fire, and that spirit I adore as Brahman. I only consider fire, said Ayatasatru, as a great power. Gargya said, there is a spirit in water, and that spirit I adore as Brahman. Ayatasatru answered, I only consider water as a beautiful reflection. Gargya said, there is a spirit in a mirror, and that spirit I adore as Brahman. I only consider a mirror, said Ayatasatru, as something brilliant. Gargya said, there is a spirit in the sound of the steps of man, and that spirit I adore as Brahman. How can you say that? Said Ayatasatru. I only consider that sound as a sign of life. Gargya said, there is a spirit in the quarters of heaven, and that spirit I adore as Brahman. I only consider the quarters of heaven, said Ayatasatru, as friends who are ever with us. There is a spirit which is a shadow, said Gargya, and that spirit I adore as Brahman. How can you say that, said Ayatasatru. I only consider this shadow as death. Gargya said, there is a spirit in the human body, and that spirit I adore as Brahman. I only consider a body, said Ayatasatru, as the covering of a soul. Is this all? Asked Ayatasatru. Gargya replied, this is all. If this is all, we know nothing, said Ayatasatru. On hearing this, Gargya said, allow me to be your pupil. It is indeed contrary to custom, said Ayatasatru, that a Brahmin should go to a Kshatriya for instruction. But come, I will in truth teach you about Brahman. And he arose and took him by the hand, and the two, walking together, came up to a man who was in deep sleep. They called him by different names, such as, you great man, dressed in whiteness, you Soma, the king. But he did not rise. Then Ayatasatru shook him with his hand, and he awoke. When this man was asleep, said Ayatasatru, where had his consciousness gone? And when he awoke, wherefrom did it return? But Gargya did not know. Then spoke Ayatasatru. When a man is asleep, his soul takes the consciousness of the several senses and goes to rest with them on the Supreme Spirit who is in the human heart. When all the senses are quiet, the man is said to be asleep. Then the soul holds the powers of life, the breath, voice, eye, ear, and mind, and they rest in quietness. When the soul is in the land of dreams, then all the worlds belong to the soul. A man can be a great king or a great Brahmin, and live in conditions high or low. And even as a great king of this earth takes his attendants with him and goes about his dominions wherever he desires, so the soul of man takes the powers of life with him and wanders in the land of dreams according to his desires. When a man is in deep sleep and all consciousness is gone through the 72,000 little channels which lead to the center of the heart from its circumference, then the soul rests in the covering around the heart, and as a prince or a king or a great Brahmin might find peace of a fullness of joy, so the soul of man has now found peace. Even as airy threads come from a spider, small sparks come from a fire, so from Atman, the spirit in man, come all the powers of life, all the worlds, all the gods, all beings. To know the Atman is to know the mystery of the Upanishads, the truth of truth. The powers of life are truth, and their truth is Atman, the spirit.